Yeah. Well, hello, anybody that might be watching. This is, I think, episode 10 of Socialist Social Work. And tonight, we're going to have a little chat and conversation about the child welfare system, and if it maybe needs to be reformed, or if it's another system that needs to be abolished, like the police do. We both have had experience working in the child welfare system, and I think we could have a pretty interesting discussion about it, particularly since Andrea was actually part of this King 5 investigation, which is this local Seattle news outlet that kind of exposed some things about what was happening within the child welfare system in Washington State. So if you maybe just want to, kind of talk
Yeah,
about that to start.
yeah. I killed my social worker career before I even got out. Because when you Google my full name, that's like the first thing that comes up. But yeah, let me see. I mean, they've been doing so. Um, okay, so this is King 5, which is like a local sort of like news channel. I mean, I don't know why I say it like that. It's your local news channel, here in King County. Uh, and for years, they have been doing this thing of like children sleep in hotels and in offices for and they've been talking about this for about 2 years. Um, and um, yeah, and like um, well, yeah, it's been like about 2 years since, or even longer probably than I've lived here. I mean, maybe you've seen um this kind of like talk before. Um, you know, because but basically, okay, I will eventually find it. Uh, but okay, so basically, should I summarize what the report was about, and besides King 5, like what it actually like
Yeah, I
means?
think that would be helpful. Yeah.
Okay. So, and moved to Seattle in 2017. I accepted a job with After Hours CPS, um, CP, which, and they paid me like $14 the hour, which was dirt for all of what I had to do, which was like, no, it was pretty awful. And the city of Seattle minimum uh, was 15, but they were able to pay me under because they were the states. There's always these little exemptions, for like, I almost said child abuse one, but also for labor abuse. Um, and basically, because I was after hours, um, because it was after hours, they basically, you're kind of the person who responds to whatever situation. And here's a link. I don't know if it's the link, but it's a link, people. But yeah, so you basically respond to anything at any time, um, because you can't. Well, we'll get more into like when we talk about abolishment. But right, the point is you can't. You know, child abuse is not going to stop after 5. But what it was horrible. It was horrible. I don't want to work in child welfare again. But it's actually not because of children. Actually, child welfare made me really. I didn't hate kids before or anything like that, but it really, really, really made me like children. But yeah, there was this thing that so there were certain placements that were hard and already had a rap sheet that everyone knew about, and we had to wait until 8 until we had access to go to a hotel. So um, a placement is a place where a youth can stay, whether that be a shelter, whether that be a foster home, a group home, um, you know, but a lot of these children didn't have placements because they were considered problematic, um, which is just like anything can go under problematic, honestly. Um, so those people would stay in the hotels, and that was like at least the best aspect of it. What was worse was the sleeping in the offices. So um, there's been some times where like a youth is just so out of control um that they would not, so we had to stay at this office. I will say this youth is it's kind of weird because he called me the N word, but he also was like black, so I was like, I don't know what to do, and I don't know why I'm bringing this up. Um, but looking at those offices, even let's say these children had to stay there, they don't have any sort of like accommodations. It's just those hard plastic chairs. And, it was basically, it's like, oh, you're just so bad. You don't deserve a bed. And by the way, in the hotel is just getting there super late, no food, and all of your belongings are in trash bags. Then the other issue was this kind of coercive behavior that I mean, it's about the people in foster care and the kids, but I do feel a lot of guilt working for them. I one time killed a Prius battery because my supervisor, yeah, told me to keep her awake because she didn't want to go to this particular um, you know, a youth care. It's Spruce Street. I don't know if you are too familiar with Spruce Street. It's not very nice. It's really mean. It's just like, you have to give up your cell phone. And for a teenager, it's just like, why? It just feels like these social control, do it or else. But yeah, and, you know, so then it came out that this higher up was just like, hey, well, yeah, like they were like, I'm not gonna, reward bad behavior. Like they know they can stay at a hotel if they don't accept X placement, and it was just so awful. And I still think about that kid. I would probably never ever do that again to anyone in my life. But yeah, my cat is crying. I'll be right back. But tell me what you feel about that I just told you. I mean, you've heard about it before, but it was pretty intense, and it was actually a friend who introduced me to the reporter because they interview about 23 former and current workers.
Yeah, I had to actually read. It was like a 5 or 6 part series that King 5 did. You'll see a link to a couple of them in the chat here for my internship because I am actually interning at DCIF because I'm in the CTAP program, Child Welfare Training and Advancement Program. So what that is they'll DCIF, the state will pay for my MSW, my master's in social work, but I have to sell my soul in a sense and go work for the state for 3 years after. But I'm having this whole kind of crisis of conscience about it just because of how, broken the system is and how, I mean, it's kind of by design, frankly. And so I wasn't super surprised hearing or reading about any of these things in the article. I guess one thing that stuck out was how these, after hours workers, and you kind of alluded to that, like they're paid very poorly. They often aren't provided a lot of training or resources in how to deal with these youth who often can have some big behaviors, understandably. I mean, they're already been traumatized enough being removed from, their parents' care and everything, and just like how punitive it can be in these placements. Like, it's understandable they want to keep their cell phones. They want to be able to have at least some type of control in their lives, and they're not even allowed to have that. And I also thought it was really interesting, the DCYF secretary, Ross Hunter, which I
Fucking
found out.
that guy. I just hate, and it's the least charming person ever.
They are children rescued from dangerous or neglectful homes.
Yeah, and I guess he was basically like a political appointee from the governor. Like, he doesn't have any type of experience in social work, child welfare, like that. He was like some higher up at Microsoft, I think, and maybe he was good buddies with Jay Inslee or something. But that's how he got into that position, and he's like feigning ignorance. Like, no, this stuff couldn't be happening whatsoever. Like, it's not a policy to let foster kids sleep in cars or to be punitive like that. It's like, how out of touch like are you if that's like the perspective that like you're having when there's so many people on and off the record saying this is actually going on, this is a huge issue, and he's just kind of blowing it off like it's nothing, right?
Yeah, actually, when I was in the EDP program, and I can't remember which class it was, but it was one we had to do. Like, I couldn't find a group, so I was put with a group that of child welfare workers. They talked about how much they fucking hated him because he really doesn't have a clue what's going on, and he's also like, at least be charming or something, but he's not. He's just awful, and I feel like, yeah, I didn't even know that. I will look more into that, but that's, yeah. Fuck Russ Hunter. I mean, there's a lot of people, but yeah, I want to go to sort of like, the trauma on the children, but also on the workers, and go back to this, like, yeah, underpaid, undertrained workforce. Before that, my only job was just like, that's been public, was working in a library or working with like Medicaid. And while I do appreciate the opportunity for it, and I argue we can all have social workers inside of us, that what's my train of thought? If anyone comes here, my name is Andrea. I am neurodivergent, so sometimes I will go on a tangent. But yeah, okay. So the undertraining, it was some of the most intense things I've seen, and I worked with homeless outreach, homeless encampments. I mean, literally going into tents, asking people if they're okay. I worked with adults in, any sort of like occasion, and nothing was ever as like, I don't know. I guess it's not, I can't quantify, but yeah, training wise, like, because one, you are either permanently part time, or you are, just hourly and just enough so you don't get insurance. I actually had to get a second job because I was like, I'm not getting enough hours for this. And it's not like they were like, oh, go into the office and maybe take this training, go into the office. It was just all, again, this neoliberal idea of this, of like, you know, um, businesses like what profit margin or whatever. Here it's just like, bottom line or whatever. And so because we were so undertrained, like I didn't even get a de-escalation, you know, like training. One time this 9-year-old girl like actually wrestled me to the floor and I cried so hard and I had to go into the bathroom, call my supervisor. But especially like high needs children, like I also remember this, um, like, a little girl, she was, on the spectrum, not really very functional, and at the same time had other issues like, um, I'm wondering because it's YouTube how we should say, um, what happens to kids because or whatever, be like the new ones like CSAM, but basically all types of child abuse. So she would take off her clothes just in the middle of things, and she deserves so much better. She deserves so much better. And she actually had a permanent placement. Basically, it was that her family was just like, "Oh, we're gonna go on vacation, so, yeah, can you take care of this child?" Or like, "Oh, we still want her, but we need a respite." By the way, if you're not of kin or like related to it, to one of these people, you get money from the state. I mean, not enough money, but there's a lot of people who make a business out of doing this, out of taking a lot of foster kids in. And, you know, most homeless people that I know in Seattle, there's this misconception by the right wing ecosystem that exists in the city. It's pretty bad. Don't believe anything. Don't believe anything you hear about this goddamn city. Except if it's coming from us, believe it. Or Google it. But yeah, it's they're like, oh, these homeless people are coming here for free adult, and one statistically, most of those people actually were born in Washington. It was just years of intergeneration poverty. You want to talk about a pipeline with like foster care to homelessness,
Yeah.
you know, like pipeline. I have a partner who was in the foster care system and it was awful, and a lot of awful things happened to him again with staff. And what they do is they'll throw the social workers on their bus, and but not the management, not Ross Hunter, not all these fancy people who actually might have some power to do it. And it's just, oh, and by the way, youth shelters were also contract like with groups like ICE to hold minors, unaccompanied minors, and
Was that
yeah.
Youth Fair that was doing that?
Oh yeah, fuck youth care. Fuck youth care so bad. My friend gave his 2 weeks notice. And I don't remember about her friend saying used to work there too.
Yeah.
2 weeks notice, and they basically were like, "We'll take your shit. Like, just leave." And I was like, that is so petty. And they were afraid that, I don't know, he thinks that maybe that they thought he was going to go on an old union organizing glory, which would have been awesome. But because they themselves have to work for the unions, usually nonprofits tend to have a harder time. Or they don't sometimes have unions, such as the ones like provided for the state. Um, Not that always that they'll do much for you. I have very complex feelings about unions, but whatever. But yeah, that was youth scare. And actually, it caused a lot of trauma for a lot of children that I grew very, very close to. They were, migrants from Central America, and that's where I'm from. I obviously had a different, more privileged life, and it has just been trauma. And even if they're protesting, like the the director, no, the CEO, by the way, this is her name, the CEO. Um, basically call the police on them. And by the way, knowing that any sort of like charge, any sort of like maybe imprisonment, any sort of thing can affect your immigration status, especially if you're trying to get papers so badly. And it is just such an act of violence. Another case that was horrible from that was just there was this kid. He was actually from Congo, but he went all the way to Colombia to come here, and he ended up a youth scare, and then some case manager at youth scare was just like, you don't look under 18. So they called ICE and they took them to that private prison. It was awful. And also I think again it speaks to like, black children will always be seen as like men and such like that, and like terrifying, and to send this sweet kid there, it was. But yeah, they get money from federal government, and they also get money from the state for like the kids in foster care. Um, eventually, the CEO was like, she left, but it doesn't really matter because these people can leave. And I remember looking it up, and that she was just gonna go to some sort of like child welfare institute in at Harvard. And I just wanted to be like, how do I call for new like employees to let them know that this is awful? But as if they would care. I don't know if things improve. They have which oh gosh, is it Colleen Echohawk, who is right now the interim director of Youth Care?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, she was running for mayor actually. And yeah, it's Colleen Echohawk, which I was really surprised that she took that job. But yeah, and it was kind of like, again, I would have to do more research on it, but talking to my friends, it was definitely more of like a PR stunt. Be like, oh, look, you have this indigenous woman as our CEO now, but these children are still being dragged into these horrible situations. We have an indigenous woman CEO, even though some of these children don't even have people who can speak to them in their own language, because like not every migrant comes from Central America knows Spanish. There's tons of indigenous languages. But yeah, that's like fuck you scare, fuck oh wow, I put in the private chat. Of course it
Oh,
did.
it's all right. I put it in the public one.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. So fuck you scare, fuck the welfare system. One of my friend actually who got me into social work was kind of really mad about it, because then this is her entire life is this, and I think we should say that it's like damage and intentions that come, even if you want to do good. And I know that for a fact that this is what she'll always want. And to do, but at the same time, he gets very highly defensive because as we're talking about abolishment and sort of like that, or you know, I didn't know that King 5 was watched that often. I didn't know that it was read that often. I was surprised. I was just like, oh, you saw that, huh? Oh, okay. I mean, I think part of it is because out of social workers are almost never visible in the media, and if it is, it's for like a shitty reason. And if it's a social worker, it's probably going to be CPS. They get thrown under the bus all the time again by administration, even though there's equally just as awful social workers who might work in healthcare systems. And again, they're the gatekeepers. They are like the police, and it can lead to someone's death. It's still violence. It's just violence by another name.
Yeah, it makes me think, actually, for my internship at CTAP, they had us attend this upending conference, which was put on by the University of Houston social work school, and it was all about abolishing the child welfare program, which I thought was really interesting since the people in this would be going into it. It was all talking about it. And one of the things one of the panelists said is that some people have to believe it's a good system because they work in it. And I think that's very true. And I think it gets back to, a lot of people go into these different systems, whether it's, child welfare or other forms of social work, whatever it may be, with good intentions, thinking that they're able to, reform the system. But I believe their name is Derica Purnell, I believe. Yeah, she's the author Becoming Abolitionist. This really good book I just started. It's about kind of police, but she spoke at this panel, and one of the things she said during one of her talks is that if people are really a threat to these oppressive systems, they wouldn't be able to become a part of it. And I think what happens more often than not is people, when they go work for the child welfare system, the welfare system ends up changing them, not the opposite way around. And just how, it's basically the child welfare system is policing without the police, and how they actually partner with the police in Washington State.
I was about to say, yeah, no, like it's no, the police will also be involved because yeah, we have to call them if a teen run away. Also, the police didn't give a shit if this kid disappeared, if they were kidnapped, if anything happened. Everyone talks about the Green River Killer, killing sex workers, which it's not. I don't think I can quantify like which one's worse than the other, but there's not a lot of talk about that these were exploited children, like under. I love your background. uh, Under like age, and there's actually a memorial. Someone did a kind of thing, a memory at the School of Social Work. I might have to show you if you ever step foot in there. But yeah, so and then because I also brought the police because they're all like freaking out. It's like, oh, we won't have enough police people, or like this is why they won't answer. And like, no, they won't answer because they just don't give a fuck, and they like portray this narrative as like there's just not enough of us. I'm like, okay, so like this seems pretty urgent, but you're not gonna come until like 3 a.m. By the way, I'm not gonna be here anymore because we would work in shifts. And yeah, I think what you said is so right. Either to change it, or though I also like this analogy, like yeah, that we that in capital society and then Marxists, and I need to finish my homework eventually so I can actually read up books that are not super neoliberal. Though, changing my program, I will talk more about that in a little bit. But um, yeah, as this idea of like your identity kind of becomes like your work, which is why when the pandemic happened, I think a lot of people kind of just went full off with their mental health because they were not used to not working, and they're used to being told like if you don't work that you're like a piece of shit, or that you should take pride in your work, especially exploitative industries. I mean, social work does it all the time. Self-care, so we don't have to be responsible for your emotional damage, um, and such. So yeah, it's just and I think that's something me and my friend have talked about before. Because for my first internship, I did it at the municipal court, and I was talking to my friend about it because we're both like um, abolitionists when it comes to like prison system. If you're not, I highly suggest that you look into it. Um, but and we're talking about it, about how like I was just like at least maybe like I didn't think I could change it, but I was like maybe there's some disruption I can cause, and maybe sometimes you can, but then they showed me something which really hammered in that like that you're more likely to be able to do help outside than inside the system. I mean, I think again, there's a lot of good intentions. I also think there's the stereotype of like, I want to save the world and change the things social workers think, have. I think they're actually more super bitter. Actually, you know, then they give them credit for, not bitter, but cynical, or just used to this burnout that just accumulates. I mean, that thing that happened with the car, it was 2 years ago. I still think about it. I still think about it all the time. And where's the state? Even though they've done so much more worse, leave reviews with me, where is their accountability for that? There's just not any. There's just not any. And I also, one less random thing to throw down. Sometimes you become a social worker because unfortunately, at least you'll be able to eat, because despite also the idea of being, I mean, everyone's underpaid, but also there's basically horrible social problems everywhere all the time. So you'll always have a job.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And kind of the child welfare system, one of the things they talked about at this upending the child welfare system, or what I'm going to start saying, the family policing system, because I think that's more accurate, is how the family policing system individualizes blame onto the family, onto the individual, and doesn't have this kind of structural analysis of why particularly, families of color, particularly Black families, are so overrepresented in the child welfare system. And I think I looked up the stat. It was, I don't know for what year, but it was like 87% of the children in foster care in California were there for neglect. And what does neglect mean? That just means, families living in poverty, families without, adequate housing, access to food, healthcare, things like that. It seems like it would make a whole lot more sense, instead of, devoting millions, if not, billions across the United States to the family policing system, devote that to, actually improving, people's material conditions. That's what keeps kids, that's what keeps families safe. Because, the family policing system always talks about how it's so important to keep, if at all possible, children with their families, with their moms and dads. That's, obviously what's best, but their actions and, just our society in general kind of, has a completely opposite, take on that. And One of the presenters also talked about, the Black Lives Matter movement. That's super important, but why aren't we talking about like Black families who are, deeply impacted negatively by the family policing system, and how half of Black kids will be, or half of Black families will be investigated, by the time their children's 18 by the family policing system, and how Black moms are likely to be investigated more than white moms for doing the same thing. Like, it makes sense because our country is founded on, and upheld by racism and white supremacy. So we see the same things enacted out in the family policing system, right?
Yeah, actually, I used to talk to my psychiatrist, like, my psychiatrist secretary about this all the time, because they also, I'm putting the link in there. It's like mandatory reporting is not neutral. That's one of what my professors actually talked to us about, and I think, even if you don't watch this entire video, please at least watch, or read that. But back to my psychiatrist secretary. I was just waiting, and I wasn't working for DCYF, but I was working for the state. And then I started looking at like all of the, just like all this paperwork, and and they expect the parents, like, you gotta be at the court at this moment, when the person might be taking the bus all the way from Everett to I don't know, Seattle, and and it is supposed to be in Kinshuk, but I think, like you said, you're right, with Black and Indigenous families, they are more likely to be, persecuted more. There was recently here, we have a child's clinic that's supposed to be really good. I don't know if you heard about the Odessa Brown controversy, but they were treating Black mothers giving birth differently, and color purple meant like, oh, this person's dangerous, and they would threaten you, taking your baby away while you're giving birth, and it's such an emotional moment, and they disproportionately did it so much that, like, one of the directors, like, I can't work here anymore, and then he went on about it. Because I had a friend who once got her dog taken away for whatever reason, and then she just told me, it's like, I can't imagine what would that be like if I was a child, because I'm Black, And back to the secretary, so she was taking care of her daughter's kids, and a lot of them actually had a lot of progress once they were with her, and and they didn't really give her a reason. They just gave her this scary package that, again, it's super obfuscating, so people don't have the time or the energy to read it. Sometimes I can't even read those, and I used to work for them, but I basically read it and be like, let me highlight yeah. Oh. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I like that. I like that term. We should be the soft globe police, because it is that. But they took the child away, didn't say anything. We talk about residential schools, and we talk about residential schools, and we talk about like boarding schools for Indigenous people. These children were basically kidnapped, by a bunch of, touchy-feely white women who felt like, they're rich and philanthropy seemed like a good hobby to have. And and they started doing this. In Britain, they did that with people who they thought were too poor. Again, like you said, you know, again, my friend who has worked in this field, both in Arizona and um, in like Washington, and for years, and 100% is most cases neglect. Most cases neglect, and not insidious abuse, but basically poverty, basically neglect. Maybe you don't have enough food, neglect. Maybe you don't have clothing that your child will, that they seem too ratty or something. There is this weirdness, in which you'll be like, oh, this person is with their kids and they're outside, and they're like in the middle of Aurora asking for money, but they're like, as long as the children look clean and dressed, like, we can't really call it. Well, I'm glad we didn't, but I was just like, that's so bizarre. Or, and I mean, neglect can cause so many things, and mental illness, job loss, depression. And what could prevent all of this? How much money could we save? I don't know. How about universal health care? How about that? How about, direct benefits to those parents? But prevention is the number one, it's one of the best tools that we have. But instead of that is punishment. Punishment. Also, states have contracts with other states to send kids. Like, let's say they live their entire life in Washington, and then they might end up in North Carolina. That's pretty fucked.
Yeah, one of the speakers at this upending the family policing system talked about was that the reason that the family policing system is tolerated in the United States is because of the color of it, how it disproportionately impacts, BIPOC communities and, families and children. And like, wow, that's probably really true, frankly. And how actually, this was from somebody else, I forget who said it, but if we're actually living up to the kind of social work code of ethics, we wouldn't be working in the family policing system, which I also think that is very true. But then also how, the family policing system kind of, preys upon the most, vulnerable elements of the, social worker population. Says, they dangle this carrot in front of people, like, we're going to pay for you, to go to school, but you got to sell your soul to us for a couple years and come work for us once you graduate, with your MSW and stuff. And just how how coercive that is, right? Like, we know, like, you probably wouldn't be going into this field if you weren't paying for your education. And the turnover rate is so high in this field for a reason. Like, the social worker I'm shadowing right now, I think she said her unit's supposed to have 7 people in it. It only has 4. Like, supervisors are constantly leaving. The frontline workers, whether it's, CPS or CFWS in the long term, once, the court has granted dependency. It's like, there's a reason. Like, this is an inhumane system for, the families and kids that become ensnared in it, but also the people doing the day-to-day work. Like, I've done it before. Like you're saying, this is the most stressful and traumatizing form of, social work there is, working in the family policing system, like, by far. And I don't even think it's close.
I mean, working in direct services in my like, I have this year, my last real job, quote unquote, I was abused so badly at that job. I basically had PTSD, into which, like, since social work direct services job means, like, you get to work with, like, directly with people, which is actually the good thing. It's actually the thing that's really important, and that's technically most of the jobs available. but the idea of, well, one, because yeah, internships don't pay shit, and I thought I was gonna starve to death. I actually like took out my pension from the state, even when I'm like, well, it's a rainy day, a really rainy day, no pun intended, but and maybe it's a place of privilege, but I feel like I rather starve than work for the state of Washington anymore ever again. Like I will work for other agencies and such, but or for other governments, but the state of Washington, probably never again in my life. I just it was really really abusive, and that's another reason why they have these incentives and stuff like that. It's because probably for whatever amount of times they pay for your school, then they'll go like, okay, bye, now we're gonna go, because I don't want to be at this awful place anymore. And by the way, I believe that program TTAP, I believe it's federal. I believe every MSW program does offer this because of the high turnover rate. And my friend, actually, when we had to do research papers, when she was in school, she did that hers on the high turnover rate because, and I was like, there's so many more systems, but she did get a lot of things. One is like, it's underpaid, underpay. I mean, especially for the region that we live in, is sincerely like underpaid. Someone joked that. I'm like, oh, I am able to live here because I have the husband boyfriend tech bro discount. But so they're overpaid, they're overworked, they're abused. Again, I feels like, I don't know, that it feels like it's a word I'm throwing around so lightly, but when this happened to me, and this was the Department of Social and Health Services, um, when my boss started just basically fucking with my head and basically fire me, even though I had family leave, which I think is the reason why they fire me, and because I didn't apologize enough to her and this white lady at Harvard who was yelling at me for no good reason. I was just like, no. And but it is abuse. Like I am tired of this, like, oh, what is this great resignation? By the way, who comes up with all this like shitty names? Just say it out loud. It's labor abuse. It's labor abuse. It's labor abuse. That's why you have such a high turnover rate. That's why you have such a high turnover rate. Do you know, if you look at like the people with the lowest job satisfactions in with the National Bureau or whatever, CPS workers, social workers, really, right there, right there. And yeah, I mean, under under capitalism, I mean, I do think that it's really hard, and like, and especially with global capitalism. But I mean, one of the reasons I want an MSW or something is like in case that I might want to immigrate, let's say, to Canada, because I am constantly, constantly terrified of being attacked by white supremacists or Nazis. And this was before the not surprised, but pretty depressed verdict of Kyle Rittenhouse. Um, yeah, and but one of the reasons
Some people are claiming he's not a white supremacist, though.
they're like, why? Like they're like, why does BLM matter here? The people
Because
who
he killed white people.
he
So how
killed
can he
white
be a white
people.
supremacist?
Like, yeah, the people who are allies with you, um, you totally are not gonna care when they get killed. And this is another thing too that I feel like if you're out there and not a socialist, it is really dangerous. And I think the Tabernacle, I don't know how to say his name, but I've been watching him lately. And then he has this thing in which, God, I forget what I was gonna say, but it was just like, okay, if it comes back to me, but I don't know. Before they mentioned him, I was a tangent on, oh yeah. So, and I've written about it before, but like, especially now with what is this, like third Red Scare, even though the United States has it's number one in red baiting. Um, it's known for a long time the people who are anti-socialists, who are virulently anti-socialist and anti-communist, and think that Joe Biden blinking is communism.
I wish Joe Biden was a communist. That would be awesome.
I wish every time I'm like, even like 2 years ago when it was like more progressive and like leftism, not me, but like the general like side guys, people were still like, damn, they're like, that we're gonna have parties with the devil and shit. Everyone's gonna get money, and I was like, they're making this sound like really good. But this anti-communism speak, it's increasing. It's so rhetoric. It's really scary because one, usually if someone's very anti-communist, 99.99% are also racist, probably anti-Semitic.
And
And
they usually have no idea what the fuck they're talking about either.
oh no, oh no, again, it just years of bad history propaganda, which is just gonna get worse.
I know I saw a tweet from some conservative politician. I think it was like Lauren Boebert or something. Said like the final variant of COVID is going to be like communism. I was like, that would be amazing. Please, I would love the communism variant of COVID. That would be excellent. Please.
I think I saw. I think it was Tommy Lauren.
Okay, yeah, somebody like that.
Thanks. I hope you're well too. Yeah, like want to be conservative Barbie or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, they don't know anything, and it's just so funny. But you can't even say anything because they are just so far gone. This is why I hate people like, if I whisper it, will he not show up and then try to debate me or say that I'm obsessed with him? But gosh, and debate bros.
It's horrible.
Yeah, they're like, oh, I can just debate, this out of it. Or I remember Brianna Joy Gray when Tyler Levin went underground. It's like, well, did you just start being nice to like the Nazis, that were trying to kill you? And it's just like, so there's some people who believe that, you can just debate this away, but no, there's like, it's really also very liberal practice. People really also get upset when you say like liberalism gives way to fascism, but it's true.
Or wasn't it like if you want to see like a liberal cry, like make a fascist bleed or something like that? Isn't that the saying?
No, but I will look that up. I mean, yeah, the rioters and stuff like that. Remember when basically like the National Guard just murdered that guy outside of Olympia because he shot someone during a protest? I don't know if you remember that.
Or that guy in Portland who Trump had assassinated, Michael Reinhold, because he killed one of those like fascist Proud Boy, white supremacist militia people. Like he was literally executed by the state in the street, like no weapons. I think he was holding like gummy bears, and then we see how the white supremacist Rittenhouse gets treated by the white supremacist justice system. I mean, it's enraging, but it makes complete sense, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, the fact that I kind of felt my breath from the Abraham case, even though it was clear, cut, and dry. just because it's so bad. And even there's no justice, as people have said, justice would be him alive
Exactly.
right now. Justice would not be these be like, I'm gonna fuck around with this person. I think part of it, like they're like, he kept going through this empty construction house, like to explore it. I'm like, so what? Like I go,
So that means you can gun him down in the fucking street? Like,
yeah, like an abandoned house by someone who's probably, bringing down your realty values more than that. Just, it's curious. People are curious, and curiosity gets you killed, I guess. Um, but yeah, like, 'cause I've done that, and I think another thing people, again, with like black men is like age them up, but he was 25. I was 25 when he died. And some of her classmates do like to go for runs, and they were also they were so freaked out, and I just didn't even know what to say. I mean, maybe there's nothing I could say, but it's just the fact that yeah, it's so I keep always wanting to talk about it. I think I want to make a video eventually about it, though sometimes I feel like when I do make socialist videos, people tend to get more mad at me. Like one time I sent punch a fascist, and then someone's like, well, wait until the fascist punches you back. And then I like the person who commented follow a bunch of like other lefties now, and I was just like, okay, okay. That's I don't know. It really freaked me out, like the Kyle Rittenhouse thing. For I'm still thinking about it. I mean, I think it's probably really selfish and self-centered of me, but I go to protests. My friends go to protests. And more we've been talking about like, the left sort of changing, or I mean, maybe the left was always for like, gun rights for, minorities, as we can see with the Black Panthers, were exterminated in 2 decades. But since 2001, the FBI is like, white supremacists. It's been 2001. You destroyed everything. And also, did you see that Malcolm X's like
his daughter died, right?
Yeah, but also they forgave his like
like the people who they claimed murdered him didn't actually do it, right? And then shortly after, his daughter passes away, right?
Yeah, it's all really kind of fucked. Him and Dr. King's death. By the way, can you do a ticker or something? Be like, Dr. King was a socialist. Dr. King was a socialist.
Anti-imperialist too.
Anti-imperialist too. LBJ was all good friends with him until, like, with like the civil rights movement, and even then, that's given LBJ way too much credit. But then he's like, why are you talking about Vietnam? Shut the fuck up about Vietnam. Like, people were telling him, like, you're pissing off powerful people. But he wouldn't stop because, I wish there were a lot of people. There's a lot of people who care, a lot of progressives that care. Maybe they're misguided. I don't know. There's just so much I could say, but that only look inwards and never outwards. And Dr. King did. And I think more than domestic affairs, the US really does not like anyone intervening with their foreign affairs.
Yeah, and we're intervening all over the world. I mean, it's the U.S. empire for a reason. Was it like 700 to 800 military bases in 60 to 70 countries across the world? But yeah, somehow it's China's the boogeyman, even though it's like less than 5,000 people have died in China from COVID-19, and what we're approaching 800,000 here in the United States. We have the world's biggest prison population, but we're the land of the free. We have medical debt, something that's an unknown in all these other wealthy countries. We don't have, paid leave. Like, people are shackled with massive amounts of student loan debt. But
I mean, the right wings are just so insane. But remember, I think it was like Joe Rogan. I mean, and I really detest him, like Pete Buttigieg, but they were like, "Why are you taking preventive leave?"
yeah,
I was like,
that
"What
was
the
stupid.
fuck
Yeah.
is wrong with you?" It's like capitalism is everywhere, but in the United States, it's just like a special punitive capitalism. It's like shouldn't have been born poor. I don't know if you ever watch Arrested Development.
I watched it back in the day. Yeah.
And I love it, and I just feel like Lucille Bluth, even though she's my favorite character, represents basically like how they feel. And the poorer you are, the more expensive life is. The richer you are, the more cheaper your life is. People will even give you stuff away for free, because yeah, you're Microsoft. I was about to say Microsoft Gates. Microsoft Gates. That should be a band name, Microsoft Gates. But then he might sue me, because he's crazy about patents and shit like that. And he's like, "Oh yeah, vaccines, but I'm not giving up the patents." And now we have a new fucking what is it? A new fucking variant, and I'm like, yeah, you can't boost the shit out of this pandemic. You have to have vaccine equity and equality. You just cannot, I just do this, and you cannot just like, sorry, like pussyfoot around this, like, oh well, like to coddle these people. I'm like, no, like, even countries like that, quote unquote, are not usually quote unquote draconian. I hate that because it's always used to like with other countries like China or anything else. Or also Vietnam. Vietnam handle it pretty well. Cuba is just. And I remember looking at this paper at the New York, because God, I always knew the New York Times was trash. I didn't know how much trash it was until I started really looking at FAIR, which is fair when it's in reporting. And they're really cool because they will do a lot of, especially, international. And yeah, it's like, what is that? What is that thing that for a while they were like, oh, you shouldn't eat it because it's bad and all comes from restaurants. Oh, MSD syndrome. Even though you could find MSD in about anything, and it's just like they have some of like MSD syndrome when it comes to like China or something like that, because they're always like, or any other country. But like I remember the picture they chose for where they were vaccinating the kids in Cuba before anyone else. Again, with sanctions, with the United States basically bullying everyone into this.
Well, I think it was what every other country besides the U.S. and Israel wants the embargo, the U.S.-led embargo on Cuba to end. And you know what Cuba has? They have universal health care. They export doctors. They have universal education. Like, we can't have this successful socialist country was 90 miles off the coast of Florida. It's like, oh, like they're doing really well. They have things we don't have here, even though the United States has a massive amount, more wealth and material resources. Like, we can't give people the idea like we could actually have, things like healthcare, so we don't have 70,000 people dying each year because they don't have health insurance, or people shackled with sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars of student loan debt because they don't come from a wealthy family. Like, no, we can't we can't have nice things here, but we got to demonize the countries that are actually looking out, for the best interests of the working class.
Yeah, and they had this picture, from Cuba, where like it looked like one of most like it's they were like kidnapping the child and about to like give them like some sort of like
Smallpox or something.
or like and like injection for like like the death penalty. Which also, by the way, do you know the United States keeps a stock of smallpox as in case of a bioweapon?
That's not surprising. Like it's very interesting to me. There was this interesting article by Alex Rubinstein on his Substack about how there was all this talk about, coronavirus was created in the, Wuhan Institute of Virology. There's not really any evidence to actually support that it was man-made, but where, Fort Detrick, they have in the United States, just out in Maryland, they have a history of creating these biological weapons. Like, where's the scrutiny there? Maybe it was created in the US. Like,
yeah, someone have a good like anthrax episode about that, because there was the anthrax thing was actually very interesting, and I think it did come from what is that place called again? Sorry, you mentioned like
Fort Detrick.
Yeah, or like Bethesda, and I think Bethesda, Maryland, and it's so great because uh I can never say it right. It's like, is it Johns Hopkins University? Like they're like, oh, we care so much about medicine and biology in the world, but they will have all these contracts with the military. But yeah, and okay, I will have to double check on that. But to me, that is again so insidious, because it wiped out generations of indigenous people, and maybe it's just the historical trauma in me. um I It makes me shudder. It makes me shudder every time I think about it. And it's like, or we're supposed to have like like in the 70s we are going to be like, hey, like maybe nuclear energy is good for power, but let's not like use it for like kill each other, mutually assured destruction. And then suddenly there's a submarine in Australia where like because Australia wants to get in on the fight with China. And and then it's hilarious because you see all these capitalists fighting each other, and the French are like, you were supposed to fight our submarines, not their submarines.
Yeah, that's why it's like so important to call out like this new Cold War on China that's being led and propagated by the US, but also countries, their junior partners in this, imperialism, like Canada, the UK, Australia. Because if we ratchet up tensions with like China and the US start some type of war, that could literally be the end of the fucking human species on the planet, because all of these countries have nuclear weapons. Like, we shouldn't be demonizing China and just parroting these like lies and everything. Like, we need to be building partnerships and alliances with these countries to deal with these global problems, like climate change, with it's another crisis that's been created by capitalism, right?
Yeah, and the boogeyman's always China too, except United States military. That's so much pollution. And the thing about Taiwan that really bugged me, because I don't know, I think Taiwan needs more nuance, but the United States wants it both ways, especially after the opening of China with Kissinger. How has he survived COVID?
I know. Yeah. How is he just like he's got to go at some point, right? And then all the liberals and politicians will be singing his praises, just like they did for John McCain or Colin Powell or George Bush when he dies, or what is it, Donald Rumsfeld? I think he died. They probably did the same thing for him, but it's like, no, war criminals, people that perpetrated war crimes, whether it was in Iraq or Vietnam, do not need to be put up on a pedestal either. Like, don't say anything about them or call them out for the horrible people that they were. Is my opinion.
Yeah. I guess this is always what I do love about Amy Goodman is that she's always just like, and this person died after 40 years of killing everyone. She never lets it go. But no, it is, and this even like a live rehabilitation. Like, oh my gosh, look at Bush.
He's painting now, yeah.
Oh my God, look at Michelle. She gave him some candy. Oh my God.
Couple of years, like they'll be doing the same thing with like Trump. Like he'll be the Trump rehabilitation tour of like 2025 or something, you know.
And yeah, this is why again my fear of like dying from Nazis. I'm not saying there's not Nazis, and yeah, Canada's basically a crazy empire. Like,
look at what they're doing to the indigenous people up there, trying to protect the land and their water, like the Wet'suwet'en people that never signed any type of treaty with the Canadian government, and yet they're being brutalized just the same by the RCMP up there, even though Trudeau, you know, claims to believe in climate change, but yeah, Trudeau is just as bad, right? He just has that liberal veneer about him, and he looks pretty or something. You know?
America is such like the loud sibling that Canada like just gets to sort of be like the other one that's a little bit more quiet, but it's also totally like the accomplice of like I think that we're doing like I can't remember if it was Venezuela or Nicaragua where they had the observers, but even all of the EU observers were like, yeah, this election is pretty clear. But Canada was the one that was just like, really? Let's take a look at that.
Probably some of their companies had like some interest in some type of natural resources or something there. So like, oh no, this new government, this leftist government, they're probably not gonna let us get away with continuing to exploit the people and resources. So we gotta paint a bad picture about what's going on.
Oh no, most diamond companies, mining companies,
Canadian, right?
Yeah, just actually 2 hours from the border from here. It's all British Columbia. I think someone once made a joke. Oh, God, I wish that maybe I could find that article. I never read it. I need to have like a save to read sort of list of really things that interest me because it was just like Canada's not a real country, and it was kind of formed into this dominion. Just for all of these companies, which is like how a lot of this nation building came to be. It was just like I have not read, and I hope to either read or like at least maybe get an audiobook of like Lenin's like highest imperialism is like the highest form. It's the highest form of capitalism, which I feel like it's so true, and especially after 1999, in globalization and such, they it was like God, I can't remember, but it was just like we was like talking about associations and but yeah, no, at the end of the day is that Canada likes to pretend that they are good. It's just like I don't know, how do we call that socialism that people, not socialism, but capitalism that people like to put off as socialism, even though.
Oh, kind of like the Nordic model. They call it like capitalism with a human face, but Canada is just basically the United States with a slightly better social safety net, right?
Yeah, and kind of like less labor abuse, and again, that is something I struggle with, but also kind of like remind myself like under capitalism, nothing is guilt free. But
There's no ethical consumption under
under
capitalism. Yeah.
capitalism. So you don't have guilty pleasure TV shows. They're all everything you watch is a guilty pleasure. So don't feel bad about it. But no, actually, with that, it's like yeah, I don't know. I remember when Bush was like compassionate conservatism. I don't know, like what call this like compassionate socialism or something like that. And you know why Norway is able to do this and it's so wealthy
Through
because
imperialism,
because they basically took all of the resources, you know, they is chauvinistic welfare. Like they only you know, label that for like chuds and white supremacists and, you know, Nazis, like, oh, we can have welfare, but only for the people we deem. But it's kind of like that because, you know, and they was are like, we're not like America. We care. We care. But no one ever talks about like, hey, give this money back or like, hey, you're talking, you know, all this talk about climate change and it's like this expectation on developing nations or almost developed nations to cut their gas emissions when the creation of this all started and you know a lot of this technology is either like hard or like really expensive for these other nations to build so like these like the global north should pay the debt it owes to the global south. I personally feel that's maybe it's my politics and that's super biased, but I don't care. When I was 20, I was just like, I like the word militant. But like I think that's one of the few ways to if not the only way to at least do as much damage control as we can with the climate crisis. Um, it's, you know, it's time to pay the piper. It's the debt that you owe. It's the environmental and resource debt that you own. I mean, that's why, like the entire Bolivia coup d'etat, and the reason why it was just like so I mean, upsetting. And then I started obsessing over lithium, you know, because it was especially Elon Musk. You can cut that out. I don't know again if that's like a TLC. I just changed the TLC so much of them, but I'm always just like, hey everyone, thank you for that. Anyway, it's not my channel. But yeah, and I remember he was just, and this guy is so fucking dumb. And he's like, we'll coup d'etat whoever we want. And I was just like, I wish I could seal you in a case of like liquid lithium as you like drown in hot lithium because it was these natural resources. It's why so many, you know, I really appreciate the young European and American climate activists. I really do. But I think an alienation for me is the fact that there's not a lot of credit given to all the work Indigenous people do, where like they're doing right now, where they brutalize. They let dogs attack them. Um, I was even watching this thing, and the person was from like you know the CBC, which is like the Canadian BBC, and he's like, "I'm pressed. You're arresting me. Like, why? You're impressed?" And they still did. And but you know, like we're talking about Honduras. Let's hope.
Yeah, we'll end it on that. But that was some exciting news to see. Was her name Xiomara Castro? I believe the Democratic Socialist candidate for
Kamada,
president. Looks like she won the presidency in in Honduras, which is really exciting because they've been dealing with the repercussions of that kind of military coup in 2008 that was supported, at least, implicitly by the, U.S. government, and Hillary Clinton has kind of said has said as much in the past. But I mean, it's really exciting to see all of these, leftist and socialist governments, coming back, into power or re-solidifying their power, whether it's in, Cuba, Venezuela, Nicaragua, Bolivia, and now Honduras. It's just really exciting to see. If you maybe wanted to close out with a quick thought on that.
Yeah, I will try to keep it short again because I am from Central America, so that's always such a big thing for my heart, and especially being a socialist. I am actually quite shocked about the Honduras thing. I am a little bit anxious because I don't know what this might mean. And so I feel like now I'll have to keep a close eye. In Bolivia, they're still trying to pretend that there's like an opposition, and that lady Arce or whatever. Yeah,
Banez.
yeah, it's just still in prison.
As far as I know,
I have a classmate who lived in Bolivia for like 6 years, and I remember in the middle of class, I was like, "Hey, I never got to ask, like, did they put her in prison?" And she was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "Yeah!" She killed a lot of people. She was, but it's like, show compassion. But on the positive end, one, I hope that Organization of the Americas one day gets dissolved. Just another capitalist, aspect.
just a puppet of the U.S. basically. Yeah.
I hope that Latin America realizes, even if not all of them are on the same ideology, that they should form their own bloc, and to abandon Cuba for so long, to me, it's not cool. I don't even know how to say it. It's just not. It being born before coming here, it was like living two lives. Venezuela and Cuba were just names to me. They weren't just things that are supposed to make me go like, ah. But on that, it's good because also Bukele is fucking crazy. They don't sanction him as much, even though he's literally raiding the offices of feminist NGOs, and basically creating this fucking currency. Like, yeah, I guess for now, Nicaragua exists during election times for like maybe the next like 2 months, but otherwise we're gonna ignore like the foreign agent law and press freedom and such. They're passing those laws in El Salvador. It's terrifying to be there. But it makes me, I don't know if people heard about it, but the pink wave, which happened back in a couple years ago. I'm hoping this pink wave 2.0, and maybe to solidify it. I think Ecuador, he's kind of like not super socialist and kind of like a neolib, but also another leftist, you know, another sort of left-leaning thing. Oh, no, maybe that was Peru.
Yeah, but it seems like he's getting pushed to the right. It seems like, but yeah, it started off really good as Pedro Castillo, I think, right?
Yeah, I'm surprised because it was like, yeah, like leftist. I'm like, okay, I will not take a perfect leftist if it means for a stronger region, but not if this is happening. I don't know what happened with Argentina, but they usually tend to have like a left-leaning government. But yeah, pink wave 2.0. As Trotsky would say, permanent revolution, permanent pink wave 2.0. That's something that once school is over, I just want to read more about Latin America and all these things. I know it's kind of like silly or whatever. It's like my guilty pleasure, but I want to read the Motorcycle Diaries and stuff like that. But yeah, what about you? Like, how do you feel about Honduras, or like also known as like, since you thankfully are now have more free time, what are it's book that you're reading or looking forward to read while you are on this break?
I started reading this again, Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, and can't recommend that enough. He wrote this when he was locked up in San Quentin prison, and basically knew that he was going to be murdered, by the guards, and how the prison system was actually, encouraging other prisoners to kill him, and he ended up losing his life standing up for some other prisoners who would have gotten murdered if he hadn't stepped in, and that's one of the reasons they didn't like him at all, but it's just because he was this staunch revolutionary, never compromised on his principles no matter what the cost. And I just feel like there's a lot to learn from that mindset and mentality, and kind of apply it to our lives now, and just how really militant he was, and he was all about using whatever means necessary to try to get a revolution going. And how just like he was in support of using like these violent measures because he didn't really think there was any other way possible, and just had just really well thought out and rational arguments, and studied Lenin and Marx and Mao, and all of these people, and just like a self-taught learner. And I think it just kind of shows to me that you don't really need um, to go to school to understand these types of things, and how oftentimes people from some of the most oppressed communities and backgrounds come to this type of understanding because they've been under the boot of these oppressive systems more than anybody has, and more than you're not going to be able to learn that type of thing from being in a college classroom. And he wrote this book while knowing he was going to get murdered in prison, and but his story and life kind of lives on through his words, and that's everlasting. And definitely recommend anybody read that book if you have not, and if you have, reread it. I feel like there's just so much to take from that. And yeah, thanks again for coming on the channel. We'll definitely have to do this again in the future.
Yeah, hopefully since break, but yeah, read that book. I didn't finish reading it, but I really like, especially the quote where he talks about like, I read Mao, I read Lenin, and it talks about solitary confinement, and it just made me realize how awful that was, and how he found kindness and hope in these writers. And I think that's kind of what they meant, all of these writers at the end, that in the future, even if things go back, that you still have to fight. And I don't know, it is really beautiful. I agree, you should read the book, or get an audiobook, or even just read the Wikipedia page on his story. It's really fascinating, and it was a very unfair thing. But thank you. And
Yeah,
abolition for the police and the child welfare system. Actually, one thing that makes me very hopeful is that a lot of my classmates are really cool. I'm not sure if we have the power for things, but most of them were like, we're supposed to pick a controversial topic, and we're like, what about abolishing social work? And everyone was like, yeah, we should. So in times like this, I try to remember the don't let like despair, don't doom.
Yeah.
We'll be okay.
Gotta accentuate the positive when we can find it, for sure.
Yeah, and more people are striking than ever.
That's also really promising too.
Well, so thank you. And